Welcome to this episode of Kennedy Saves the World. The world has been shaken by recent events between Iran and Israel and the U.S. involvement sending those 7 B-2 bombers to drop some bunker busters over Iranian nuclear facilities. So we've been talking about the skirmish between Israel and Iran, what President Trump has called the 12-day war. A lot of people have expressed opinion about U.S. involvement and what that could mean in the region. But we haven't really talked about the Iranian people and what they want, what they see as the future of their country as a safe and stable place to live where they can prosper like anyone else wants to in the world, but they want to do it in the Middle East. How can that take shape as things are moving so quickly, and how can Iran stabilize? Joining me now, it's Shahin Gobadi. He is a member of the National Council of Resistance of Iran, and they have been calling for swift change in Iran. Shahin, welcome to Kennedy Saves the World.
Oh, thank you for having me, and I hope you have had a good day, and I hope you will have lots of good days ahead, and to all your viewers and listeners, wherever they are and wherever they might be.
To you as well. Now, I have a lot of friends growing up in Oregon and spending most of my life in Los Angeles who are essentially exiled from Iran. There's a gigantic Persian community, and so many of them want to go back home, and they have been unable to for whatever reason. And, you know, we know hearing from a lot of the Iranians inside the country still that they are frustrated. Tell me, from your perspective, from a place of resistance, what do the Iranian people want right now?
Actually, I think this is the key issue, and you touched upon a very, very important fundamental issue here. The Iranian people obviously want to get rid of this regime and establish a democratic secular government and have a governance according to the 21st century, which, you know, freedom of expression, personal liberties, and to be in peace and coexistence with the rest of the world and prosper and enjoy their basically rights, which is given to every human being. And that's quite natural. And to that effect, I think it's very important to realize that there has been 5 major uprisings in Iran in the last 7 years alone. And each of them, people basically have been much more vociferous, demanding a regime change, but a regime change from what I say, from bottom up. I mean, a change by the Iranian people, for the Iranian people. And each time, while they have faced a crackdown very, very ruthlessly, next round has been more inclusive, stronger, with slogans like "down with the oppressor," being the Shah or the supreme leader. They clearly show that they don't want to go back to the time of the Shah. Obviously, they reject the current theocracy, and they're looking for, as I said, democratic republic in Iran. So, to that respect, I think Iran has never been any closer to change since the inception of this regime back in 1979. The regime has never been any weaker, and the resistance has not been any stronger. And I think we are on the cusp of a very, very major change that will transform not only Iran, but the whole Middle East, and to some extent the whole world, I would say.
How do Iranian people feel about U.S. involvement and augmenting what Israel had started in terms of hopefully decimating those uranium enrichment facilities?
Well, first of all, I think it's very important to realize that the main war in Iran for the last 40 plus years has been the war between this regime and the Iranian people. And if I may put it in the context, this regime has executed 120,000 freedom-loving Iranians, men and women, as young as 13-year-old teenage girls to 70-plus-year grandmothers, who simply stood up for human rights and democracy, and that was their sole crime. So that tells you that there is an ocean of blood between this regime and the Iranian people. Mm-hmm. And there's no way to go back in that. So now, basically, the Iranian people do not buy the notion that the United States is an enemy. Far from it. If one listens to the slogans that they chant, one of the slogans is, "The enemy is here, they lie to us, that's America." So I think it's quite evident that people fully realize that they have one enemy and only one enemy, and that is this regime, which has destroyed Iran, such a beautiful country, such a resourceful country to where it is today, which has become an international pariah. And I think it's important to realize that the main victims of this regime have been the Iranian people from all walks of life and all denominations throughout the country. So, as I said, no wonder that there has been 5 uprisings in the last 7 years alone, because people really, really are hungry for freedom and democracy. And one thing else, so far as the U.S. policy about Iran is concerned, the Iranian people loathe the appeasement policy that was pursued by several administrations. I mean, the Obama administration, the Clinton administration, the Biden administration, trying to placate the mullahs in Iran. Because at the end of the day, the mullahs took all the concessions from the West here, including the United States, previous administrations, and used all the resources to repress the Iranian people, or to advance the nuclear weapons program, or to stipend their proxy groups which foment terrorism throughout the world. So yes, they are very much in support of a firm policy. They are looking for a different approach towards Iran, but that different approach, I should be quick to add, as Madam Mariam Rajavi, the president-elect of the National Council of Resistance of Iran, has said time and again, as recent as last Wednesday, addressing the European Parliament, does not mean a foreign war. So at the same time that they reject appeasement, they don't want a foreign war. They're not asking for, financial support. They're not asking for weapons. They're not asking for boots on the ground. They think the task of getting rid of this regime is to the Iranians and to the Iranians only, and their organized resistance. But the world should be on their side with a good policy.
Yeah, so they don't want foreign boots on the ground. Totally understandable. The American public doesn't want that either. That's not what they voted for with President Trump. They don't want American servicemen and women's lives at risk, and they also don't want the civilian casualties that follow from these years-long conflicts. So Iran, what you're saying, wants to liberate itself. How do you do that? How does your council work with people inside the country to, now it seems the regime is at a tipping point. How do the people there, the people who are part of the National Council of Resistance of Iran, how do they practically work together to overthrow the regime?
Again, you touched upon a very, very important and critical question. Yes, they have to work together. Actually, the key element is that there is a massive network of resistance inside Iran. That's the key. In the forms of the resistance units, they're affiliated to the main resistance movement called the People's Mujahideen Organization of Iran, also known by its acronym MEK, which are working diligently day in and day out, obviously taking great risk, trying to break this spell of repression and basically activate the public to come to the streets. And whenever there are protests, these are the people who guide them and direct them and lead them and so on and so forth. And they are active in all 31 provinces in Iran. And in terms of having a better perception of what they do, they are, in the daytime, they are, ordinary people like office workers, university students, teachers, nurses, so on and so forth. But at the evening, they get together in small groups, and they basically target the symbols of the regime, like the big banners, propaganda of the regime, or a statue of the supreme leader, Ali Khamenei. They burn them, or they hoist the big pictures of the resistance leader, Madam Mariam Rajavi, to encourage dissent, to show that the regime is not invincible, and getting people to stand up. It's like a sledgehammer or tip of the arrow trying to break this spell of repression. And eventually it comes down to a massive uprising by the people from throughout Iran that will overwhelm this regime. And there are signs that there's one at work. And that's actually what makes the regime quite terrified, because they know the enemy within is their Achilles heels.
Yes. And how has this emboldened the people who are members of the small resistance groups? Do they have less fear that the forces who have gunned them down in the streets in the past, or kidnapped women and, made them disappear, are they more confident that they will be able to overcome that? And how will they do that?
Yes, absolutely. If one looks at the trajectory, as I said, in the last few years, there has been more and more uprising, more activities. If I make what quantifies their activities in the last year alone, from March 2024 to March 2025, uh, which is the Iranian calendar, basically, beginning of the spring to the end of the year, there has been 3,000 similar acts I just mentioned throughout Iran, which is basically like 10 acts a day and growing. And to get a good sense of how many people are talking about, just in the year from September 2022 to March 2023, 3,626 members of the resistance units simply disappeared. We don't know what happened to them. They were, as you said, apprehended. What have you. So that shows that we are not talking about a small number of people in Iran. We're talking about a very, very large number of the activists. And the good thing is that there are more people joining, particularly young women, who see that the only hope they have for the future is to get rid of this regime by their own endeavors, while they fully realize the risks entails, but they know that this is the only way they can, as I said, write history with their own hands. Now, as the regime gets weaker, obviously the people get more emboldened. I mean, particularly remember, this regime not only is getting inside Iran, but regionally speaking, it has been becoming much weaker in the last year or so. A lot of its proxies, like Hezbollah and Houthis and all of this, took a lot of shellacking last year. And the climax was the overthrow of Bashar Assad regime in Syria, which was the linchpin of the regional strategy of this regime. And it all basically fell down in 11 days.
Okay,
this pretty much, this evaporated the myth. Yes.
Shahin, let me ask you this. Was the Iranian resistance involved in aiding or guiding the Syrian resistance that overthrew Bashar there?
Not directly, but one thing we have done over the years, we have exposed a lot of the regime's nefarious conduct. We have helped the world to know the regime's misdeeds. For instance, at the height of the Syrian civil war, we exposed how Iranian regime is recruiting Afghanis and Pakistani mercenaries to kill poor Syrians, and how they are basically plundering Iranian people's wealth to finance such a misdeed. Or when it comes to the issue of terrorism, for instance, we have exposed a lot of the regime's terrorist networks. And also on the issue of the nuclear issue, which is the main issue concerning the world these days, it was our network of activists who, with great risk, revealed the existence of such a clandestine nuclear weapons program to begin with. You see, the sites in the three sites that were attacked, targeted, Natanz and Fordow and Isfahan, two of them were basically identified and exposed by our network, human network in Iran, back in August 2002 and December 2005. Actually, in the course of the last 3 decades, and specifically since 2002, we have made 133. We have made 133 revelations of the secret nuclear sites.
And who were you revealing them to? Were you revealing them to the United States and to Israel?
No, we revealed them to relevant authorities. Obviously, American authorities became informed of this, as well as IAEA, which is the entity of the United Nations in charge of monitoring the proliferation in the world. And also, we also had a lot of press conferences, and we shared them with good journalists.
Okay.
So basically, there was a combination of these sort of activities, and I would say almost all of our revelations at due course were confirmed, because, as you know, these are the most secret aspects of the Iranian regime's nefarious conduct, and much details that eventually, despite the regime's all sorts of concealment, facelifting, procrastination, hide and seek, catch me if you can attitude, the world found out that our revelations were accurate, and that was very much helpful. I can say with utmost confidence that if it were not for the NCRI revelations, the mullahs would have had the bomb by now.
Don't go anywhere. More Kennedy Saves the World right after this.
So, Shahin, let me ask you a question.
Please do.
I know that Israel and the U.S. Intelligence sources have had very different reports on how close Iran was to having enough enriched uranium to build a bomb. How close were they, and what do your resistance and intelligence sources tell you?
But basically, see, for a bomb, you need three parts. You need enriched uranium up to 90%. You need weaponization, which you actually make this like a bomb, the implosion process, which is a very delicate process and intricate and sophisticated. But also you have to make this like a warhead and put it in a ballistic missile, and that's what's called delivery system. So far as enrichment was concerned, IAEA has been monitoring and has reported that Iran had enriched up to 60%, and going from 60% to 90% is an easy task. So that was not a major hurdle. For weaponization aspect, they worked diligently over the years, and they also worked diligently for the warhead process. Our intelligence all these years showed that the regime worked on all these three aspects. And quite honestly, for sometimes there was this confusion whether Iran worked on the weaponization or not, or after 2003 they resumed or not. Our information showed that they never gave up. There were some ups and downs, but they never relented on that aspect.
Yeah, why would they? Why would they give up when they were so close and there was really no serious enforcement mechanism or incentive?
Right on the money. You are absolutely spot on. Actually, the regime felt no pressure. There were not any intrusive inspections. And given all the concessions given to them by this JCPOA agreement back in 2015, actually they had a field day to that in this regard. So, yes, they worked not only enrichment, which was, the focus of international community. They worked very, very diligently to weaponization and also for delivery system. Actually, since December of 2024 until May of 2025, we had 4 revelations about this weaponization aspect and delivery system, new information, new places that nobody had heard about. And we urgently urge IAEA to go and inspect immediately. Obviously, the regime does not cooperate. The regime always, obstructs and is in non-compliance of the agreement and its, commitment. But nevertheless, we kept revealing, saying that, look, the mullahs are getting closer and closer and closer to the bomb. So obviously, the assessment varied from, several weeks to several months. But we were not talking about a long time span. We were not.
How does this end, Shahin?
How does this all end? I think this is the big question. I think it will all end with a regime change in Iran. But that would be the task of the Iranian people and the organized resistance, and solely their task.
How close do you think they are?
They are closer than people think. Iran is in a very explosive state. Allow me to provide some facts. Iran being a rich nation, a very young nation, Iran has the second biggest gas reserves and third biggest oil reserves in the world. Despite all this fortune, because of this regime's policies and attitude, according to the regime's own figures, 80% of the population, 80% live below the poverty line. That speaks volume. That, what is the situation for ordinary Iranians. Many, many millions of Iranians cannot make their ends meet. Women are, treated as second-class citizens. While they're very well educated, they cannot, get a lot of jobs. And as I said, according to the law, they are, treated as second-class citizens. So there's a lot of grievances for this regime. Corruption is so rampant. Nepotism is omnipresent. So all the elements for a big change are there. And the fact of the matter is that there is a viable alternative out there in the form of National Council of Resistance of Iran, with an identifiable leader in the form of a woman called Madame Mariam Rajavi, with a 10-point plan which calls for separation of religion and government, a non-nuclear Iran, an Iran which is friendly with the rest of the world, an Iran which believes in, market economy, in Iran which is in a mutual, amicable, amiable relationship with the rest of the world, and so on and so forth. So there is a viable alternative. There's an organized resistance on the ground, and there's a totally disenchanted population. I think all the elements for change are there, and the international community should be on their side. And I have to reiterate, that does not mean money. That does not mean giving them weapons. And again, That does not mean, boots on the ground. All it's required is a good policy, basically to recognize their right to bring about a regime change by themselves, for themselves, and that will be a new dawn, not only for Iran, but for the whole Middle East and for the whole world, I would say.
If that is the case, do you see Iran signing on to the Abraham Accords? Iran
is an enemy of Abraham Accord. Look, if you see, the role of Iran has been totally destructive. Actually, they are the enemy number one of any friendship in the region. From the day one that this regime came to power, you see all this chaos in the region. On October 8, 2023, just one day after October 7th, Madam Mariam Rajavi, the president-elect of the resistance, said that the head of the snake for war and belligerence and terrorism in the region is in Tehran, and that's the supreme leader Ali Khamenei. And I think it did not take long for the world to see that who is, instigating all this chaos and war and belligerence in the whole Middle East. Who has established Hezbollah? Hezbollah is not a Lebanese entity. It's an entity created by the IRGC, the Revolutionary Guard Corps. Who is supporting, financing, arming Houthis? Who is helping all these Iraqi Shiite militia groups? And so on and so forth. It's all Tehran. Tehran has been the metropole of all the crises you see in the Middle East today. And so long as you have this regime in place in Iran, in such an important country, you will not have peace and tranquility. Going for the nuclear weapons, showing discontent in the whole Middle East, repressing Iranian people, are in the DNA of this regime. So I think the Iranian people and the Iranian resistance, by getting rid of this regime, not only serve the Iranian people, they will serve the whole world a big favor.
Well, I hope that you are right. I think that would be, the best case scenario, the way that you have laid it out. People wanting to determine their own destiny on their terms and not with foreign liberation and bombs and money. And obviously, Iranian people have an incredible long history of working hard and certainly determining their own destiny. And I really hope that continues for your family, for the people that for the people who have been terrorized by this regime, and for all of those longing for freedom. I hope it happens. I hope that we are able to celebrate it soon. And I certainly hope that it sets the stage and precedent for the rest of the Middle East. Shahin Gobadi from the National Council of Resistance of Iran, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me. I appreciate you.
Well, I appreciate you giving me the opportunity. And among everything else you said, the term you said soon was like music to my ears, because the sooner the better that this happens. And one thing else I have to add. When this regime goes, there will not be any chaos. Iran would not be Iraq too. Iran would not be Afghanistan. Iran would not be Libya. Iranian situation is very different because there is a viable resistance there. People are ready and they want to take determination in their hands. So I think a very different Iran, a bright future Iran, it looms on the horizon. And the sooner the policy is changed to that effect, I think the better for the whole world. And once again, thanks for having me. And I wish you and all your listeners a good day and a very happy summer.
Amen. You too. Peace and freedom, my friend. This has been Kennedy Saves the World. I'm Kennedy.
Listen ad-free with a Fox News Podcast Plus subscription on Apple Podcasts, and Amazon Prime members can listen to this show ad-free on the Amazon Music app.
Oh, go ahead and leave me a review while you're there. I'd love to hear what you have to say. You've been listening to Kennedy Saves the World on the Fox News Podcast Network.